I've said before pretty explicitly on the show that in general, when things get bad, I will tell you they are really bad. Most of the time, my goal is to dissuade propaganda and conflated panic, which, look, we live in a system pretty much built on those bedrocks, right? Our whole media system and structure is entrenched in those, and it has been for like the last century. I mean, like Edward R. Murrow is great, but if you're going to tell me there was no spin during McCarthyism, oh boy. So this is a story with some very heavy implications on the future, and some of it is conflated, not out of bad faith, but because it's something that we need to keep an eye on, and some of it is legitimately concerning and dangerous and something that you need to engage with at every fundamental level. But I advise you in this situation, do not panic. Panic does not help in these situations, right? Keep an open mind and hear me out. All right, let's talk about the Voting Rights Act and the Gerrymander Wars. If you haven't heard by now, yesterday, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the case Louisiana versus Caius, a case regarding redistricted maps in Louisiana, which could in all possibility gut the Voting Rights Act. If you don't know what the Voting Rights Act is, how do you not know what the Voting Rights Act is? Whatever. It's the 1965 landmark legislation that was instrumental in stopping racial discrimination when it comes to voting. But actually, it is the legislation that stopped racial discrimination when it comes to voting. But over the last 2 decades, since John Roberts has become Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, he has made it a concerted goal of his to dismantle key parts of the Voting Rights Act under the guise that it's no longer needed, that racism is over, and using the Constitution to put these guardrails in place is overreach, which I feel like the spirit of Karl Rove and Don Imus are in the room with us right now. But look, it's not just Roberts. This has been a long-standing GOP issue, dating back to before Bush, to honestly even before the Clinton era, right? To that old notion that after Martin Luther King did his whole speech, racism ended, and we got a bunch of really cool music and sitcoms. Essentially, what's at question in this specific case of Louisiana versus Caius is Section 2 of the VRA, which basically makes it so that any map featuring racial discrimination, even if it's not intent on being racially discriminatory, is a violation of the act. Okay, so it can be challenged. What gutting or limiting this would do would make it so that the only challenges that could come to these maps would be from intentionally racially discriminatory practices. And I don't know if you've noticed in the last 8 to 12 years or on those leaked chats from just a bunch of kids, according to JD Vance, but there seems to be a lot of, I'm not a racist, but let me use the N-word liberally, and also slavery was epic going around. And look, in a legal context, it's obviously hard to prove intent in some of these cases without a reasonable doubt, which is really fucking bad, given how bad faith all of these gerrymandering legislatures are. Now, during the arguments, there were obviously signals from the conservative majority on multiple fronts, but the general takeaway was that they either want to limit the provision or gut it entirely. Because apparently, according to them, protecting against racial discrimination has a time limit on it. Like the fucking Mario All-Stars game for the Switch. You can't have don't be racist in this act forever, all right? You can only have it until people aren't racist anymore, which if you were fooled again by that leaked chat with the Nazi sympathizing by a bunch of kids, again, thanks, JD, racism's a thing of the past, all right? Chill the fuck out. Go get yourself a milkshake. Unless you're Mexican, then talk to that ICE officer. Let's be very real. This is a 5-alarm fire and a sincere problem. A reason I try to give nuanced takes is so when real fucking issues like this come up, I can say, this is really fucking bad. The estimate currently people are citing is a plus 19-seat gerrymander that the GOP could do. Now listen, there are disputes to that number. Those are the numbers analyzed by Fair Fight Action and the Black Voters Fund. And there are parts of that analysis that are giving you actually the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst case scenario. But again, it's not out of bad faith. It's because this is severe and you should be paying attention to it. A lot of the districts in the Deep South could snap their fingers at gerrymander full control of some of their states, alongside many Democratic states free to do the same. But the numbers in terms of sides aren't equal. A lot of these Deep South states have less roadblocks in the way of implementing these changes. States like Texas and Mississippi and Alabama, many majority-minority districts would evaporate. And that will change the political calculus of how many points ahead the Democrats would actually have to be to even get a 50-50 chance now. Here's the thing. An important thing to do here is to be accurate, to understand the actual damage and what could happen from it, right? And I'd like to point to this article by Nate Cohn. Nate Cohn runs the Upshot at the New York Times. Yeah, I get it. I know a bunch of people right now are screaming something Ezra Klein. I'm not talking about him, right? I'm talking about Nate Cohn, because in terms of electoral analysis, Nate is actually pretty spot on a lot of the times with his numbers. He's the guy in charge of that fucking needle every election that drives us all crazy. Well, he went through and did a little bit of an analysis of it, and I think this piece is probably a piece that tells you where the real problems are while also illustrating the realistic impact versus the panicked one. So first off, the article goes on to say it's most likely around half a dozen seats, right? Maybe 7 or 8. But Nate then says, quote, after those 7 or 8 seats, things start to get a little fuzzier. That while the GOP could eliminate more seats, more problems end up piling up onto their calculus as they go further and further. For example, quote, one limiting factor is that Republicans can't eliminate every majority district without endangering Republican incumbents. This is especially true in relatively competitive states like Georgia or Texas, where Republicans must preserve some number of Democratic districts to ensure that every Republican incumbent represents a safe district. It's also true in Florida, where Republicans have the additional burden of needing to plausibly follow the state's not strongly enforced fair districts amendment. There are other factors that Cohn states too, like that some states would have to change their district maps so much that many GOP incumbents may be worried about their donors, their constituents, and their support evaporating. Also, primary challenges. He goes on to list a district in Austin as an example of a tolerable limit to that gerrymandering, going on to state, quote, legally, Texas Republicans could eliminate it today. It's majority white. Mathematically, Republicans could eliminate it by extending even more Republican districts into the city like a pinwheel centered on Austin. But there hasn't been much appetite to do so because there are so many other underlying factors. And look, even the article states that doesn't mean this isn't an enormous haymaker to the Democratic calculus for 2026 and a huge red light for what could happen to our democracy. The fact is, a lot of these maps may not even make it to 2026 because the ruling will probably be decided in summer or past when a lot of the state primaries have already occurred. But in 2028 and possibly 2030, there could be some really outstanding, scary effects. And again, that doesn't mean it's impossible for our elections, but it makes an already disjointed system incredibly and massively unfair. Now, there are a number of takeaways, I think, for Democrats or the left or whoever, right, when it comes to this story. And I'll start here. 4 months, even before the 2024 election, we have had this insufferable purity debate between both leftists and liberals. And notice that I said both, all right? Just because you put Kamala Harris down on your ballot doesn't absolve you of purity testing. You pro-Gaza people elected Trump. How do you feel about everything now? You wanted a girl boss, a genocide. Just strawmanning to the extreme just so you can call the person an idiot. A hallmarked pastime of the internet. In fact, I lied. We don't have a liberals versus leftist problem here. We have a contrarians controlling every fucking part of the conversation problem here. Here's the fact. There is actually a significant realistic way to fight this, but it requires the capacity for self-awareness that maybe you suck a little bit. You could be right about everything politically and still suck a little bit. I suck a little bit. We all suck just a little bit. Your analysis, your theory, your fucking perfectly quoted retweet sucks sometimes. All right? Like, it happens. You're not the smartest person in the universe. And even if you fucking were, you're an insufferable dick, Todd. And more so than that, we have to acknowledge 2 things that are almost demonstrably true at this point. 1, Joe Biden's strategic political wing of the Democratic Party does not understand modern politics, period. They suck at it. That's not even me trying to dogpile on them, right? I'm just trying to acknowledge like what's there, all right? There are objective signs almost at this point. Like the two largest left-leaning figures who attract the biggest crowds and the most enthusiasm are two party outsiders with major criticisms of Joe Biden. Also, his vice president's book explicitly stating, hey, Joe Biden's team kind of fucked this up. So number two, critiquing electoralism as having no material effect and just supporting liberal politics and the ruling class is an intellectually dishonest and strategically fucking stupid argument. Like one's from Joe Biden's team. Oh, you guys should be friends. Democrats can be corrupt, capitalistic, and performative for moneyed interests and still have material differences from Republicans. That's not an endorsement. That's just a fact. It's not that you're a leftist or a liberal. It's that you're a fucking contrarian and a know-it-all and an asshole. You can be what you want. You can say all of the things you want and not be an asshole. You can advocate for socialism or whatever ism you want without lying about the clear differences of party ID. Also, at this point in the video, I just want to point this out. This is in the script, but I just wanted to say this just because I noticed it. At this point in the video, I've criticized liberals, centrists, leftists, neoconservatives, MAGA, and Nazis. These 6 different groups. If you come into the fucking comments and you go, hey, you're just picking unfairly on my group, bro, please touch it. I will send you grass to touch it. Okay, I will send you a fucking lawn to put your hand on that lawn and get some sun in your life. Please, please. All right? Un poco, just a little bit of grass. Touch some. At this point in time, the structure in power, the ruling class, the American specter of authoritarianism is trying to specifically rig the game in the place they are most vulnerable. And that is electoral politics. Every decision this administration has made, every lever it has pulled is to try to damage electoral politics. Their goal is to intimidate people in left-leaning cities and American citizens who might be immigrants. It's also to conflate socialism with dictatorship while doing explicitly very dictator-like things. It's to ideologically pit centrists against leftists so fascists look better. That's it. If you wanted a comparison to Hitler, that is something Hitler explicitly did. People who talk shit about voting aren't wrong that community programs and mutual aid are vitally important and that people just voting and that's it isn't a one-size-at-all fix. That is true. But there is a real disservice being done right now by some people who fucking live on Twitter or TikTok that strategically does not understand the moment. Trumpist nationalism's greatest weakness in the United States is the loss of voting power and the demographics it controls. If you're a centrist or a Marxist or a liberal or a leftist or whatever the fuck who particularly does not like Donald Trump and thinks this is scary, the goal of the dictator here is to make you feel everybody else in your tent around you that their actions ideologically help Trump and authoritarianism, so you fuck up those demographics. The only way you beat this fucking clown is to stop saying that everyone mad at genocide helped him get elected, or that everyone who voted blue and supported Democrats are the same as Republicans, or to make an umpteenth post about Hassan's dog collar, or to think that Taylor Swift's jewelry is somehow a dog whistle to the SS. That's fucking crazy work. That's all bullshit. The goal should not be to discuss who lost us the last election or what's the right way to protest. It's what do we need? If this is strategy, if this is a fight, it's what do we need? How do we get there? Is it unrealistic? What makes it unreal? How do we make it more realistic? How do we keep the things we want, not gut this thing and make it happen, even if it is unrealistic? That conversation needs to happen, and it needs to be blanketed by our right to participate in anything is under threat. Fuck all this other shit. If that is the message you lead with, and the court does rule against the Voting Rights Act, and we take the time now to frame what is a very real possibility of the loss of our rights as a loss of our rights, that is a big motivator in fighting this kind of power grab. There's a reason why Zoran Mamdani crushing his Fox News interview that worked so well captivated people and made them forget about this for a few minutes. It's because it was practical thinking, right? Talking to people about specific issues that need fixing. Not quibbling over like who's the realist and shit. And the real work is, once you get that power, how do you fix this stuff? The United States government structure needs a patch. This is old. It's broken. You need to patch this shit up. You need to do something to make sure that voting rights are stronger. Maybe not even the John Lewis, but everybody keeps talking about that bill. You need something stronger. You need stronger structural guards here. That's possible, but you need to start talking about it now. And one last thing before we finish this, right? There was a clip with Harry Enten, who does have some really strong polling analysis and has had some over the years, right? That got passed around by everybody earlier today, talking about what's going on with the generic ballot and Democrats. Pretty much, the Democrats are at plus 3% right now. And that is a little bit of a worry, because at this point in October, before the midterms, it's actually way lower than the percentage was in 2018. And that's caused the odds of betting markets to shoot up for Republicans and down for Democrats. Democrats are still leading, but it's caused a noticeable shift. And look, I want to do a longer video on some of the weird things that are going on in polling right now, right? But just to give you a preview of what I'm thinking, as much as I do like Enten, and I think he does good work when it comes to analyzing the numbers in a sober way, I think he's a little bit off the mark here. Specifically because right now, with the way the generic ballot questions are posed, the Democratic Party has an enormous branding problem, with large numbers of its constituents not wanting to call themselves Democrats. There are a large number of people at this point mainstream who vote Democrat, criticize the party specifically because the party leadership kind of sucks, and when posed with this question, I would assume would use it to express their discontent with the party. That's like a culturally normal thing at this point for a lot of Democrats to do. And look, I'm not just pulling it out of my ass. There are a number of different factors that kind of correlate with this, like Trump's unpopularity being so high on almost every issue, the high number of undecideds in these generic ballot polls, as well as what people feel about the issues and the opposition to Trump's policy and where those numbers lie overall. But also, if you look at the analytics on engagement over relevant social media, not just Twitter, because Twitter is a fucking smokescreen and a bubble, right? The strongest stars, like I said, of the left in the Democratic Party are outsiders who specifically criticize the Democrats. That includes people like Hassan Piker, AOC, Christian Devine, Sam Cedar, Adam Friedland, even Pod Save America and Jon Stewart. Those guys have been consistently criticizing the Democratic Party and Democratic leadership for a minute now. I don't think these are people who are trying to figure out if they like Trump or not, right? I think these are people who are frustrated with the Democratic Party and want to try to signal their frustration with them. But look, I don't want to give into this, like, I don't want to be one of those people who like unskews polls. That's not what I'm trying to do, right? I just think analyzing the data around the way people try to engage with the internet and try to constantly signal what their feelings are through different kinds of things like this, right? And manipulate social media. I think that's important to take a look at. Also, I think betting markets have their own issue, but I'll save that for another video. But for right now, that's our show. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. We'll be back on Sunday with another Freestyle of the News. And my name is Tabani. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see y'all soon. Let's go.